Welcome back to another episode of The Last Hit, the third episode, in fact. We're on a bit of a roll here on a weekly basis. My name is Hysterics, and I'm joined by the two most attractive men in China. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dagda, this is Jordan, and I say that with confidence because I tell you what, I can't be wrong in this state. How are you? Let's start. Should we start with a person who's a bit tired?
No, I just casted 6 games. Pretty fun games. I also find it unfair that you call him Dagda, but me Jordan.
Did I?
You did.
I'm so sorry.
And you said
Lyric?
you can't be wrong.
Yeah.
That's actually true.
Jake,
Oh,
Hysterics, Osipenko.
Please.
He's just be more personal with you. And you've been like, how dare you know me?
Honestly, at this point, I think I'm just proud that you can pronounce my last name. That's so nice.
Because you're Australian.
Have you had a go, by the way?
Osipenko. It's not that hard.
Okay, all right. Well, it's more of like a soft S, but that's actually okay. Hey, it's good to be back, guys, because it's been a long week. We've done another series at LPL. Of course, it is a Sunday as we're recording this, just as a side note to everyone out there. We record this on the Sunday. It usually gets out there on the Wednesday, the Thursday, just as we're getting off the English broadcast week. And we're heading into another week where the... I don't know. How do I put it? Are you excited by LPL at the moment? Do you think it's getting better?
I literally just tweeted before coming on this after my cast that I love LPL.
Really?
Did you just see the Rogue Warriors
I
games?
do not check your
How
Twitter.
do you not love
You
the LPL?
never tweet.
Yeah,
That's the
true.
problem.
Yeah.
Have you seen his Twitter? He tweets
Yeah,
like
a little
once
bit,
a month.
A little bit. Yeah.
You got 14,000 people waiting for you to say something.
And now they know that I love LPL. So there's your answer.
All right, Dagda, we'll leave him to it for the time being. But ladies and gentlemen, just a side note for you. If you're not already listening on it already, we are available on Spotify and on Anchor. Everything to your needs. The full podcast and the playlist should be secured there for you as well. But you can also check us out on YouTube. So we're getting out there and we're getting across. But let's go into the LPL discussion because, as I just said, LPL's heading up a bit. We're heading towards week number 5. That's the halfway point. And as people are listening to this, we'll well and truly be there. I have to say, standing still looking a bit upside down.
Yeah, they're still looking a little bit funky. I mean, I'm looking at V5 still sitting way up there in the tables. Top Esports taking the rightful place, though. Number 1, I don't see these guys being taken down a notch anytime soon.
There's a lot of questions as to how that actually happens. Of course, at this point, Lyric, take me through your thoughts of where you thought would be at this point versus where we are now.
So top esports and V5 kind of expected. Look over at IG and RNG. Also 2 teams I expected to be in the top. I guess LGD is a bit surprising, even though I was high on them coming into the split, like higher than before. I didn't expect them to be top 3, top 4. But I also want to be an optimist and say I'm happy that Rogue Warriors and Demo picked up a win.
You have to say, because...
Not a series win, but
a game win, right? You know, like 1-10, 1-12 each.
It still upsets me that BLG are down there, though. Every time I look at that roster, I'm like, these guys should be higher. And especially when we saw them at the start of spring looking good, and now we come back in.
But
and it's like,
is it BLG without Meteor?
true.
So that's where it's not that surprising, right? Even though Best 16s performed fine.
I feel like BLG in spring when they had media was down there at the start anyway, weren't they, from memory?
Didn't they only end up 1 series away from playoffs as well? They ended 7-9,
But
right?
that was like the the bounce of 9th to 14th. Because LGD were on 15th on the cusp at 5.
But
so.
still, they were 1 series away from contending for being tied
the problem
with
was
WWE.
that they won all those series at the start of the year, and then it just
Oh,
went
yeah,
down
that's
from
right.
there.
No, it was weird because they won 2, lost a bunch, then won a
yeah.
couple
'Cause
more.
yeah.
And,
Remember BLG in spring, it was the week 1 before COVID,
Yeah.
and they were like, holy moly, this is
Yeah.
a smart, Korean-style team. And then we came back and it's like, there has been some internal drama, and BLG have fallen apart. And it feels like they're still reeling from that a little bit there. I know we're going to be moving forward into today's episode, much talking about Fiddlesticks and Volibear, who's entered the LPL on 10.12, and also our usual Duncan Dud and so on and so forth. But before we do go into that, one note is that we do have 5 weeks left. It is only a 10-week split. And we will eventually, as you said on broadcast the other day, Jordan, getting towards 3 series weekends.
Yep.
So we'll ramp up a little bit there as well. But we go all the way till, what is it, end of August?
Yeah.
I think it's like the end, right?
So-
It's somewhere in the mid-end.
Yeah,
20s, right?
we ended in the first week of, or just after the first week of August is when regular season ends. Then we're into playoffs, and then we got regional finals and all that good
Well,
jazz. So
I guess we still have to see how the format's going to shake up for LPL
Yeah.
with the fact that we have 4 seeds, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how the seeding's going to work, but 4 seeds into Worlds, bigger chance that V5 or LGD make it.
I ran the math with Munchables there the other night, and it's like they have to end up in like top 4 essentially to get there. But like, there's still a chance. It just depends on how a few other games end up fluffing out.
You know, at this point, the safety in teams like, what was our grand final? Top Esports and JDG. Even though JDG aren't performing too well, people would have seen on the standings just before. If you're watching on YouTube, but for anyone else, JDG is sitting pretty low at the moment. The Spring Champions, which is a big concern. They do have the championship points, though, from coming first in Spring, so all they have to do is make playoffs, and essentially they should get their seed.
They did also just win today, right? So they were 2-2 before today. Now they are 3-2, so still above 50% and making their way up.
Still a bit of a concern, though, right? It's fair for me to say JDG are a concern.
You mean a concern for Worlds or a concern for playoffs?
A concern for their quality of play leading into playoffs.
I mean, concern for quality of play, sure, but JDG's going to be playoffs.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I think they'll still make playoffs, and I mean, they do have the points coming from Spring that should help them get towards Worlds, but yeah, I'm definitely worried looking at them. I'm not convinced by their state of play at all right now.
Well, I know we'll probably do an episode on JDG as well. We've got a lot of episode ideas. The problem is about sorting them out, but today I wanted to be talking a little bit about Fiddlesticks and Volibear because we've seen a lot more of the bear. We saw a little bit of Fiddlesticks mid as well, so we'll start there because Fiddlesticks has been debuted by Doinby and also by Mole from V5. And even though we saw it a lot in the LCS, I know we talked about this on broadcast, here in the LPL, he sits mid, he drains, he pretty much does the same thing, and he's a bit of a threat.
Yeah, I think people don't touch on the mental abuse you get playing against this champion as well, because every time he just walks into lane, presses W, and you have that screech that just plays over and over again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you got to be have that stuck in your head the entire time you're playing against this guy.
The thing is, I think he fits our region better than any other region in the world, right? Like,
Right.
when you actually think about LCS, it was Bjergsen who played him twice. I actually don't think he's been picked up other than that.
Yep.
Kind of strange when, Bjergsen's a carry for his team. But here, we have these teams like FPX, like WE, like E-Star now that play things like Set and Galio and, like, a bunch of bruisers in the mid lane anyway that do just have these non-interactive laning phases.
Sooning there as well, like Angel
Well,
on top of
so
that.
you now have a lot of teams that also have the option, which is
Yep.
where I put Angel, right? So I feel like it'll be a perfect pick for our region for these laners who want to play a non-interactive laning phase and look to dive side lanes and look for skirmishes.
So is that where you pile it in? Is it a pile towards the Galio, the TF, the roaming mid lane? Is that what it's all about for Fiddle? Because getting my head around this was very much like he absorbs any kind of pressure in lane. He survives when no one really should. And then he comes in with Crowstorm as usual at 6.
I feel like there's no like straight up equivalent to him inside the mid lane meta.
No.
To me, kind of reminds me of Lissandra in a sense, but he obviously has much more lane presence than Lissandra, right? You're able to actually push away, unlike her. But you're safe from ganks since you do have the Aftershock can just fear someone and walk away, and you're very strong in dives and team fights. So two very similar.
And you
it's
build
like,
full tank.
exactly. It's like
Yeah.
Lissandra mixed with a bruiser like a Set to me.
And the thing is, because his kit has so much like percentage numbers in it as well, he ends up doing a whole heap of damage as well. So this is where you can get off those dives in the early game. Even though you're running full tank, you can just go and push aside or into a side lane and then just go for a big dive and kill people anyway.
Kind of abusive. It was fun watching Doinby on it, though. I think it was the IG game that they lost eventually, where Mole's one was actually the one they won against. Oh, bugger. Who was it against? Do you guys
RNG.
remember? Was it?
That was RNG.
Okay, well. It was actually on the same day, too. It was against TF and it was against Oriana. So it was kind of fun watching that debut. Fiddlesticks, just before we move on to the bear, I want to make one more mention that it has only been the Aftershock. And as we're recording this, of course, it could be a very different state where we are seeing more Fiddlesticks through mid.
I kind of want to see him a little bit in the jungle. I think there's like some really cool clear paths you can do, and I don't think people realize that like there are certain areas you can stand in the jungle so you can clear like your blue and your wolves at the same time and certain things like this.
Red
So
and Raptors.
yeah, exactly. So there's a bunch of these weird nuances to having a Fiddle jungle that we haven't seen come out yet. But I think the issue is they're so difficult to set up, and if you have someone in Vayne on top of you, you're just kind of screwed.
So I was talking to some pros and coaches about this, and what they said is they actually feel like there's some matchups it's fine in, and one that surprised me was Graves. They said you can pick Fiddlesticks into Graves. The problem is, sure, you'll be able to clear your jungle just fine. Your clear is good. Maybe Graves can come and try and force you off a camp, but he won't be able to kill you. The thing is, you have to out-farm him, or at least keep up in farm, and also do more since he will outscale you to be able to do more in the late game. So it's like, why would you pick this champion when there are these conditions? There needs to be a very clear, like, maybe you're facing something like a Sejuani or something that's not going to disturb you. You can farm just fine, still have the early pressure, and, things will go right.
It's kind of interesting because in the LCK, they've actually been experimenting a lot with Fiddlesticks jungle, and I was listening to Atlas on broadcast today. He stated that there hasn't been a Middlesticks yet, whereas in the LPL, we haven't had that jungle Fiddlesticks, that transition. Like, in a vacuum, picks changed and used very differently.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if we do end up picking it up, but I think if you've got all these conditions where you got to try and make it work, and it's just like, well, why don't we just go towards a different style of jungler? I don't think we'll see it a huge amount in the LPL, but
I do want to say, though, you have similar conditions for it in mid lane. Like, Fiddlesticks mid actually does have a lot of, like, questionable matchups. Even Victory 5 picking it mid against RNG, picking it against TF, right? You walk in the middle of the wave, you drain, he gold cards you, so you now don't get the refund on the cooldown. You weren't able to push the wave, and you're just kind of there, right? What do you do? And there's a lot of champions like this that should be able to punish Fiddlesticks more, but LPL teams are still willing to pick it, as shown by Victory 5, so there are certain junglers, maybe like SOFM, that I think potentially could pull this out in the jungle.
Yeah. SOFM feels like the kind of jungler that would experiment with that a little bit as well. That's Fiddlesticks. That's, of course, going to change over the course. I'm curious if the runes change alongside it as well. Do we be spamming this in solo queue? Just quickly, do you think anything about Aftershock versus something else?
So for mid, I think it's exclusively Aftershock, but in jungle, we've seen Unsealed Spellbook as well. Yeah. So that's a potential. And I've also seen some people run Dark Harvest, but I think that one would be extremely greedy for pro play. Even the Unsealed Spellbook, though, I'm actually not quite sure how it would really work. You're obviously going to have that utility after, the early phase with jungling and, like, being able to go affect lanes, or if you can take something like a Ghost or an Ignite. But
yeah, I mean, it'd be nice for a gank, I suppose, but I haven't really seen a huge amount of it now. So, I mean, if you can take Ghost for a gank, as you're talking about, you can just run into something, people exhaust
or something.
Or something along these lines. It could work out, but yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the Aftershock. I think it just gives you so much for what your plan is, right? You want to go in with this big ult, fear a whole bunch of people, get your Aftershock, and then just sit in the middle of the team fight with your Reap. So I feel like Aftershock just works so well with what his kit is designed to do right now.
I'm excited, though, he's getting played, though, because old Fiddlesticks was a mate of mine, and I'm really sad he got reworked. I think he was fine the way he was. But moving on, Volibear has had the same treatment. Volibear, as one of the larger remakes as well, now actually has a kit that people are happy to play through. And we saw a lot today. I know, Lyric, you casted a little bit here today, but at the moment, as I was making this, we've seen it about 4 or 5 times, bar today. And Volibear, top and jungle. So he's looking, okay, what's your thoughts?
He makes me think of a stronger laning set in the sense that, like, his numbers seem stronger. He's a lot more dynamics to his kit. He's still very strong in the dive because, Set obviously his Haymaker, he has his ultimate, but I'm still not completely sold on it other than that aspect, right? We've seen that his numbers are strong. We've seen in top lane, he can really out-trade anything. Jungle, I'm a bit less sold, but it's also, I haven't had the time to catch up on LEC where it's extremely popular, and we've only had it played in jungle once today by Le Yen. It seems like a similar story, right? You're strong in early game duels. Once you hit 6, you can dive, but
I think that's kind of the nice part about having a jungle is that you can open yourself up to dives elsewhere when you hit 6, because it's kind of hard sometimes to get the pieces in the right places for some teams to have Volibear interact with the bot lane a huge amount so you can try and set up and get these kills going. And even if you get Volibear fed, it kind of feels like, okay, well, he's still a bruiser. We can still deal with him to a certain extent. It's not going to win you the game outright. So I can understand where the Volibear comes from. And obviously, it's a different build. You just go into the full tank with the jungle volley. But yeah, I still think it's nice in the top lane. I'm still kind of the same as Lyric here. I'm not entirely sold on it. I'm waiting to see a bit more. I think it's great as, a lane bully and doing well in that regard. But when we get to those later game team fights, I'm kind of like, well, it's not having the massive impact that I really want to see from it.
You can see people are still experimenting. You guys even said this on cast today, you and Munchables, that this pick is like, there's still a lot of experimentation with the build especially, and also the rune it takes towards lane.
Yeah, we obviously see Conquer, Grasp, and Press Attack. We've even seen Aftershock in one pro game. I think it was in one of the LEC games, but so you have a lot of different options. And the thing that I find really interesting about this pick is I like what LEC does with it, because you'll typically see it in jungle, but paired with an engaged top laner like an Ornn or Wukong, which shores up a lot of its issues you talked about. It's still just a bruiser, right? Yeah. So it still just needs to run at you, and hopefully it's ahead so it can just run you down like we saw today Flandre doing. But if not, it's really going to struggle, and I guess that's my issue. I feel like the few times we've seen it here, it's like relied on as the sole engage, and that feels really tough where it's like, okay, unless you are ahead like Flandre was today, it was like 6-0 or something, you're just going to get kited out by the 80 carry supporter mid.
It is kind of hilarious, though, watching Volibear do this massive leap and roar into the air, and he lands like 2 foot away. Like, I feel like if it's going to be this massive animation, he should have at least like a little bit more so he can jump across the small body of water rather than just plonking down in the middle of it.
It looks suboptimal, to the very least, right? But a couple of compositions we've seen paired alongside it with here in the LPL. I remember the Galio games partnered with it, with topside volley, Galio mid, where it's like everything put into the dive. I think even like the Ezreal Tom Kench bottom lane.
But we actually didn't even see the dive with the Galio go with the Volibear.
Yep.
It was Galio Jarvan, and they pretty much never interacted with the Volibear, which is a strange part. And I guess this is why I'm not sold on it here, because I don't feel like we've seen a lot of like decisive Volibears and how you play around it, to where, you know, in other regions, since they are playing Volibear more, I guess maybe we'd get a better understanding once we see it here more as well.
It'll take time as we go through solo queue as well. Just context, that was E-Star who pulled that out the other day, who you and I casted, Jordan. So that was you were like, oh, this comp could work like this, but we never actually saw that interaction, which is kind of disappointing. But innovation with new champions is fun, because eventually teams will understand and get it. As we've seen today, there was actually a higher priority on champ select with first rotation red side, Volibear, which I think I was surprised about, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised to see it locked in. So, like, it does well in lane. I haven't found anyone really so far that can bully him out, or at least go well against him in lane. So he ends up winning in like the set matchup. He ends up winning a whole bunch of different matchups, and I'm kind of waiting to see something that can go toe-to-toe, so it just secures that top side of the map. But I think still we got to see more of what it's possible to do with it, because it feels right now a little bit lackluster to me, because as Lyric was saying, there aren't a lot of teams playing around what his kit offers right now and trying to set up anything. So maybe as this time goes on, we'll see a bit more of it.
I will say I'd probably prefer the Ornn at this point still, because Ornn's still a great champion if you had the choice between the two. But anyway, we'll move forward. Volibear and Fiddlesticks being played a lot more. We're expecting to see it more in 10.12 as we go across to 10.13 as well. We've got to get into our usual sense, because it's our third week of the podcast. And you know what? The dunk's been coming out. And, you know, all our viewers will see this. They'll get to see your face on a big old muscly Darius in a second. That's exciting, isn't it? What's your dunk this week?
I think my dunk is going to be FPX for this week. I think over the last couple of series, they've really started to get themselves back on track, and it has been a little bit shaky, at least for me, for the last little while, starting off at the start of the season anyway. So having them come off the back of two important series wins, especially against like the likes of Invictus Gaming, I think really does show the growth that these guys have in the last little while.
We didn't remember that they only did pick up that singular game win against IG, but the series was extremely close, and I agree with you that, like, the spirit of the series, I don't feel like there was really a loser. Both teams looked like top contenders that can make a far playoff run. And then their series against E-Star was just absolutely dominant. Me and you casted that.
Yeah.
The Duinby Shockwave when Khan baited everyone in.
That was sick.
And then the game 2 casted in. It's hard not to be a believer in FPX when they put up performances like that.
At least warming up. We're getting towards the middle of the split, and there was a conversation that we've actually all had, which is like, strength in the early part of the split isn't going to be reminiscent towards the end, because it's about ramping up. It's not about what you enter the split with, it's how you exit. Right?
And I think going back to that E-Star point for that series, at least, it felt like Tien woke up. Like he was figuring out, okay, cool, look, Wei's going to be going for these dives. I'm going to go track him, and consistently showing up every time these dives were going to happen, and figuring out how to play towards what E-Star are going to do. So it kind of looks good from Tien's point of view that we're starting to see him go back to what made him that world's MVP.
He is still having small moments of, I guess, Tien moments that we saw in spring, though, right?
The only thing that jumped out to me was, it was either around Baron or Herald, where he ended up in the enemy jungle after his team pretty much all died.
Yeah.
He was left in a bad spot, pretty much died, but didn't feel like that was really on him rather than the team call overall.
He got the turnaround kill as well. He managed to go one for one in that play.
He did go 1 for 1. So I agree with Rob here that it looks like Tien has looked much better in the recent series. To me, the bot lane is still the one I'm skeptical about, to where we actually saw Crisp have like great highlight moments in that series, but then also moments where you're like, man, what are you doing?
And then I guess LWX on that other note, in Game 2 especially, had a very good game, and he's ramping up a bit as well, because I think LWX has been a bit of a liability, especially in 2020 spring.
And that's where I'm kind of wondering if this like 4v2 dive bot lane over and over, and this was going to be the game plan, was to kind of shore that up. Like, we kind of talk about it for teams like WE, whereas like protect Jomong, make sure that he's not going to throw away the game.
The ultra liability.
I'm now kind of seeing that maybe that was the game plan for FPX, was if we just played through LWX and Crisp in the bottom lane, maybe we don't have these issues, because I haven't been impressed with LWX. And people will point towards Khan coming into the roster, and, well, at least people were going, hey, look, this is the issue. I don't think it was. I think it was just that, hey, well, now that FPX are putting those resources into the bottom lane, Well, now LWX is looking a little bit shaky as a result.
Yeah,
I do want to say that I think in team fights, LWX and Crisp still look amazing, like top of the league for sure. It's only in the early game where we see moments where you're just like, man, what are you guys even going for? What was this play? Why is Crisp here looking for this engage? Why is LWX stepping here? That it's like, even though I'm criticizing them relative to their former form, not necessarily to the rest of the league. I still think the bot lane is still, in my top 6 of bot lanes in LPL.
And that's why I'm only mentioning LWX. I think Crisp, as he said, sometimes has been a bit shaky, but I think he's still been the stronger of the duo.
Yeah.
Like even in the plays that we saw against E-Star where Wink was going underneath the tower, nearly getting the kill on LWX, it was Crisp who managed to turn that around in certain cases. So I still think it's... Crisp, I can give a bit of a leeway to. I think it's hard because one of the things about bot lane is it's often defined by who's the worst player than rather who's the best player, because if you take that one step out, it can be punished far easier.
Make the duo look crap.
Yeah, so I think if I'm looking at that in that context, I feel like Crisp can kind of get a bit of a pass because I just haven't been impressed with LWX.
Okay, that's very fair. I want to talk about other parts of the map. Before we go to Doomby, who's also the talking point of FPX, let's quickly touch on Khan, because it has only been Khan for the summer split so far. And it feels like any issues I had with communication in spring, or any issues with assimilating Khan into the roster, are basically non-existent now.
Yeah, I think they're figuring out how to play with them. I mean, I also, as a split pusher, but we see him on the Ornn, he's been able to be an engage tool for them as well. So having that dynamic where they can play towards both styles is looking good for them.
Khan's been a top 3 top laner in LPL. He's the most consistent player on this roster, like in terms of his individual role. So I don't think there's much to talk about with him. His Ornn game was very good. And I remember in the second game, I think it was on Mordekaiser against E-Star, didn't need to do much. So Khan's good.
But let's go to another solo lane. What do you guys think of Doomby right now? Because last series against E-Star, not bad. However, this split, Lyric, you had some
the shockwaves. Like, his Orianna was good. Yeah. His Orianna did a ton of damage that game.
He got a big one.
But the problem I have is when I look at the E-Star series, I'm like, yeah, look, okay, some of it was good. But a lot of that was you grouped up around Khan, and then you just hit E and O as Doimby. It's not massively difficult.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff where I'm not convinced by Doomby. I've been a little bit upset with him for the last little while, where I don't think his lane has been particularly good. He's been missing out on waves to go for roams and then not actually achieving anything on those roams, which was one of the big things that I had for him.
I hope FPX fans, flood your DMs, flood your tweets.
100% going to.
This is your dunk. Now we're taking it.
This is your dunk.
Oh, yeah, true.
It's your dunk. Now we're taking a Duke on Doomby. So.
I don't know. I don't think there's too much to say about Doomby. He's definitely looked shakier than Spring, but again, overall, this team as a whole has looked shakier than Spring.
Yep.
And it feels like they're finding time to find their form. And each series he's looking better. It's just that game 2 on Kassadin. Sure, it was once again E-Star kind of making a mistake, but Doomby showing, hey, once I do get this 2-0, I feel confident to ramp up this advantage.
But I do agree. The Kassadin did look good, and I think that's why they are the dunk is... Even though they have looked very shaky, I'm talking about this last 2 series, we've seen them try and return to form of what FPX was of old. So, I mean, if I'm looking at holistically, is that the entire split so far, that's where a lot of these gripes start to come in. But I think at least over those couple of series, we're starting to see.
And also, criticism for top teams is not the same as criticism for teams like OMG or TMO, right? Like, you're not going, well, you just need to get a basic understanding on basic, direction of League of Legends. It's like FPX, no, at this point, you should be doing X, Y, and Z. You're a top team, you're held to a higher standard.
No, exactly. So I don't think we're talking about FPX relatively to the league. We're talking about FPX relative to the fact that, hey, you guys are 2019 world champions. That's a pretty high bar to meet. And again, I feel like a lot of our criticism is pretty fair in that context.
Well, I don't know. There is 9 other teams that are world champions, so, basically a league.
Whoa. Not
Hang
9.
on, 8.
Actually, no, there's not, actually, because there's repeats there.
SKT has a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Samsung obviously has 2 of those as well, so...
And then Season 1 doesn't count. Right.
True. Nope, doesn't count.
I'm a European here, so I kind of feel like I can't give that one up. I can't give that one up.
Hang on, to be fair, there were skins in the game.
True.
So that does count, right?
Nope, doesn't count.
Okay, well, Lyric, you know what?
I'll stand with the Europeans. It counts.
You know what? We've been so positive. Let's go to someone who's ultra negative. Do you hate me that I put you into this dud position?
No,
I called it your what was it called before the dunk and dud?
Lyrics losers.
Lyrics losers. That's right. And I thought that was the biggest loser.
Let's be honest. It's very fitting that you gave me the dud.
All right, your turn. Where are you going with this?
So, sadly, LNG gave a bunch of us false hope, especially Munchables. He really believed in LNG. They beat FPX and RNG, and guess what? They just lost to OMG and Vici. Two of our teams towards the bottom. Isn't really much worse of a loss you can have. We saw up against OMG. They actually got some early game leads. They got Ocean Soul in game 1. They had an Aphelios.
They lost with Ocean Soul.
It should not be possible to lose. We see a bunch of missteps from Light. We don't see them pushing their advantage the best way. They get caught out. Game 2, they draft this proactive comp with the Galio Jarvan. They're making some moves, and then they keep trying to punish this Fiora instead of just snowballing around neutral objectives, and then they mis-execute once. Curse kills 2 people, makes that famous outplay we all know now, and then the game looked unplayable.
I don't understand how you can go from beating FPX, beating RNG, and then losing to these bottom-tier teams and looking like one of the worst yourself.
I can't get my head around it. I mean, look, Maple in the series against FPX and RNG looked absolutely incredible, and I was like, thank God, we're finally seeing what Maple is capable of after what has been 2 or 3 even maybe terrible seasons.
Some of it's been Maple again.
Exactly.
Maple
like,
give it and Maple take it away.
So that's where I'm just like, I don't know. I can't figure these out. They're so hit or miss, and it just sucks to see, because when I had Chenlun coming in and I saw, okay, this team's starting to work towards a better spot where we've got them cohesive and they're actually making plays as opposed to what we saw in spring where they just did nothing for 35 minutes and lose. So I'm happy to see them at least attempting stuff, but it's not working out.
This leads to another point that, we had games with them today. Chenlun's not there anymore. Now it was Flandre, and Flandre in game 1 carried. Flandre showed if you get Volibear and you can, get those early game advantages,
it was great.
How you can snowball. I think he ended the game like 7-0 or something. He was the big playmaker. Then after that, in lane, he was still good, but he was really a non-factor, and it didn't feel like any player individually. It just seemed like LNG didn't know what to do. Because once again, we had them draft this early game Jarvan and some snowballing lanes. We don't see XX going for any ganks, and nothing just happens, and Vici just win.
It's kind of crazy to me, because if I can't pin it down to one person on LNG, something has changed. It's like a matter of direction, or something shifted within the paradigm of the team itself. And it's hard to pinpoint.
Wait, do you mean from last year?
No. From their success against RNG and FPX.
That's 2 series.
I don't care.
You're saying there's a paradigm change, like a big change in the team. There's 2 series. And again, to be fair, I think their FPX win was pretty legit. Their series against RNG, though, it's just that game 1. RNG was winning like 5k gold or something and just kept running into them one by one by one. And game 2 looked pretty tilted. So I don't think we saw a big change. We've seen LNG definitely like to play this late game style. The Kale, the Aphelios. Wait it out, scale it out, show up in big team fights, because not only Maple, but Light in team fights has been pretty impressive. The problem is, 1, against OMG, they weren't able to consistently do that. And 2, when they draft these proactive compositions, it just looks like they're not able to either create or find the windows to start snowballing the game.
And I think a lot of that is kind of what we saw in spring as well, right? Where there wasn't really much mid-jungle synergy kind of working out. And it feels like, okay, we've seen a little bit of it, but it's still not getting to a point where I'm super happy with the way actually XX and Maple play together.
I think XX's jungler is falling back into habits that we saw in top esports, where as a jungler individually, he did not look like the strongest member, but he was pulled up by the rest of his team. Although this is different, it still feels like XX is falling back again.
I do want to say, to be fair and go off your point, that it does look like this split, the members have stepped up individually. I think Maple definitely looks better. XX maybe looks the same, but since his synergy with Maple has definitely improved, 100%. He looks better as a result. Light surprisingly looks good. I don't think any of us had any expectations for him covering for Asura. The only one who I think has fallen off a bit is Dwan. I think Dwan's still having a lot of problems where I'll just see him randomly getting picked off warding by himself, or he'll engage a team fight too early and just like, what's really going on? But overall, this seems like systematic problems with kind of how this roster came together, rather than, hey, I can pinpoint this is the issue here. Sure, there's no clear star player on this team, which they were never going to be a top contender, but they at least have the talent to be, competing for 8th through 11th, right? Somewhere in that range.
You'd hope so, because LNG, it's big wins fostered now with the bottom tier teams taking them down. So the road will go on, and I like that. If you missed out as well, we're going to have to put that picture of you photoshopped onto set. I thought that would be fitting for your dud, because you look down on the peasants. You're the boss, and you make the decision.
I mean, I did do the set pose too. I mean, he's in a chair, so it's kind of an awkward pose, but also to make the serious face, which I'm not going to do here.
And you got an 8-pack as well, so that makes sense. You know, you've been hitting the gym. Don't look down. Don't look down, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's move forward. The duds out of the way and into the match highlights because we have some important matches to look at, especially when you never thought in 2020 summer you'd be saying that V5 is in your highlight book and a match. No, Lyric, put your hand down. Not yet.
You never thought that?
No. In 2020 summer, you thought, yeah, V5's going to be a top team.
You said it a lot. I don't think you believed it.
I said it.
You said it in spring.
I said it on the ESPN show with Emily Rand, like in the second week of spring. What are you talking about?
Did you actually?
I did. I said in summer they'd make playoffs.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that's good because...
that was the biggest roll of the dice I've ever seen.
Was it a roll of the dice?
Those dice were rigged, I tell you what. E-Star versus V5, that's coming up on the 5th of July. Sunday for you guys as this podcast is getting released. Now, this is on an English broadcast day. I'm excited we get to look at this one. We just watched E-Star as of recently get taken down by FPX, but still for V5, the form they're in, depending on how they go against FPX, still an exciting matchup.
I still think this is a matchup V5 are going to win. Like, I actually really favor them coming in against E-Star. I think their bot lane looks really, really good. I think the mid lane, and so when I was looking at E-Star coming into this spring, I was like, cool, Fun, Wei, and Xiaoxi, they're going to work really well together. We started to see them sort of synergize where they were making plays, they were invading, they were this trio that was taking over the map, and then it's kind of fallen apart since, and I haven't been massively impressed with them. Xiaoxi getting picked off in a bunch of different situations. Same with Fun. I haven't really seen them get into the groove.
So they're not bullies anymore. They're not the e-bullies.
No, they kind of got told on by the teacher, and now they don't know what to do. So.
E-detention.
Yeah.
I want to say for E-Star, Cryan on this team wouldn't fix their problems. He would be a band-aid in the sense that, sure, maybe they'd be 1 or 2 places higher, but when I look at this team, there isn't enough like star power or a clear lane to play around. They make it bot, but honestly, Wink does not feel like a top-tier AD carry. Sure, he has some strong laning moments, but it's also completely facilitated by the map.
I will interject and say that from our, even in the FPX series, he was the one person that looked like he was threatening to FPX when we got towards team fights and when we got towards those full 5-on-5s. Maybe that's the way he's built with Ezreal, you know, being what Ezreal is at the moment. But Wink has still had some pretty high moments.
But so he's had some high moments, but when you think of Wink, do you really think of someone like a top 3, top 4 AD carry who can single-handedly carry this team? And I guess if Cryan was there, then you have this dual threat. But at the same time, I don't see it with the system around them either.
And I think that's the big problem here is that, like, there's no real threat. Like, you kind of need a dual threat here to help carry this team because but the problem is Fun's going towards Gallios and sets and the likes of this stuff, so you end up in this situation where Wink has to hard carry and he just isn't in a place to hard carry a lot of the time.
Like, if you had Huanfeng on this team, I think there's potential for it to work. It still won't win LPL, but there's potential for it to compete for a, like, getting past first round of playoffs team, because now you have a guy who can take all the resources and hard carry to that next slot, and Wink's not that guy.
Honestly, I thought they'd end up leaning back into Wei, taking over, like, kind of almost into the Kanavi slot, where it's like, okay, the team starts to play a little bit more around Wei. We've got, like, Kindreds and Graves, and maybe he can try and do some magic with it and try and ease that burden a bit, especially with how heavily Fun is, well, happy to play towards a jungle matchup and help out his jungler, but it just never really came to anything, and that's why I'm kind of surprised that we haven't seen more of that.
And I agree with everything you just said, and bring this back to the matchup overall. I don't usually ask for our predictions at the end, but just to highlight how one-sided I think this is.
Really?
I think V5 is going to 2-0 this. I feel like Mole is much better than Fun. Even Wei might be a top 4 jungler this split.
Oh,
wait,
no, we got Wei versus Wei. Oh, no.
But no, Wei has played insane this split.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
He's the better Graves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's tracking the enemy jungle so amazingly. His ganks are great. His sense of the map, his team fighting, just everything. Like, I can't praise this guy enough because I'm so surprised.
I will say, like, Wei coming out of, you know, the Suning B tier, as in, like, he came in over Hacker in 2019 summer when Hacker wasn't performing, and also went to AD carry, and you're like, Wei doesn't need to be on this team. Has, like, that refreshing break, and then comes in like this, and it's easy to say that Wei is double the man that Wei is.
Yeah, I guess so. And the thing is, I mean, you were here casting last year, so I'm sure you know, right? He was never a bad player. He was always average, maybe slightly above average.
Really good Karthus.
Exactly. He was a really good
If that's
Karthus.
a compliment.
But this split, he's looked insane on everything he's played, so you're now outclassing E-Star definitely two of their roles. And then when I look at bot lane, it's like no contest. Sam D has been insane, and we don't need to talk about our Lord and Savior at all. Everyone knows.
And even the top lane has stepped up for me. Like, I was surprised by Bew getting a bunch of solo kills. He's looking way more comfortable on this roster. And if you put him side by side by what happened to him in spring on Suning, it's just night and day.
So do you not look at Xiao Bai and say that, look, Xiao Bai's improved from what he was in spring, and Xiao Bai is still a threat?
I think the thing for me, though, is more the team has tried to play around Xiao Bai, just doesn't work out.
Okay.
I thought so. It was kind of weird because they started training him to be this weak side top laner, and he got better and better in spring at being this weak side top laner.
It very much felt like FPX Lite in a sense.
Yeah, and then it just got to the point where we're like, right, let's just shift it all to Xiao Bai, and he kind of just got gold dumped on him and then didn't know what to do with it. So it just was kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to try and carry. And then it was like Renekton's, and yeah, we've seen a little bit of the volley being invested in, but he's just not able to get up and going to the extent where he can be the carry that you need. Like, if it was the Shy who got all this gold, right, cool, we know he's going to go do stuff, but Xiao Bai just doesn't have it.
I do want to say, like, his laning phase is clearly better than Spring. Like, hands down, like his individual laning is good. My problem is he still only gets put on, like, 2 champions. Like, 90% of the time, you know he's going to be on Ornn or Wukong. Every game. It doesn't matter. I don't know if it's his problem necessarily, or I'm going to guess it's actually a team issue. Like, they need him on these style of champions. They want him on the initiation role type thing.
But I think that's it. Like, who do you look at the... Like, yes, we've got some really cool clips from Chelsea of, like, hooks and stuff like that, but realistically... Who do you look at in this roster to be like, you're the engaged tool? Like, Wei's not going to go and do it because you've got to look at either Xiaoxi or it's going to be the top laner. And unfortunately for Xiao Bai, it's 9 times out of 10 it's going to be him.
Well, and I think just having support as your only engage, like, that doesn't work,
exactly.
right? Like, you need somewhere else with, whether it's, we even see in mid lane, right, with all the bruisers, whether it's mid jungler, AD carry, not AD carry, mid jungler top. I just had a long day. You need this like double engaged duo somewhere to really get on backlines and start up these team fights.
Okay, well, because I was going to look for a way that E-Star, surprise you here and beat down V5.
Impossible.
You think it's really that impossible? Because this is crazy to me that a playoff team from spring, and I know that's just based on results, which now performance doesn't really indicate. E-Star, who made spring playoffs in their first ever split in 2020, which, is when they entered the league, versus V5, who were, yes, a very different roster, who were 17th and winless, but are now recently had a really good performance with their new roster, that it is that cut and dry.
Yeah, I'm trying to run through scenarios in my head where I can see E-Star coming out ahead, but unless they just like completely abandon mid lane and just try and take over against Sam D and PPGod, like just over and over dive these guys. But even then, I'm not convinced that, Mole doesn't come out so like whatever Mole decides to play, he just comes out super far ahead and he's able to carry, or Wei just is sitting down there because he's been really good at tracking.
Isn't it kind of
so
funny?
He just plays through bot side.
I think in this team, if I looked at a weakness of V5, I'd say it's Mole. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Well, Mole has the problem of, I'd say, a lot of the like star players in LPL that he's willing to risk making an absolutely amazing game-changing play by putting him in a position where if he messes up a little bit, he ints. And like we saw that a lot in spring where his team wasn't good enough and he'd typically be behind or put himself in really bad positions and he'd int a lot.
Yeah.
But now we actually see most of these plays working off because like we think of his Fiddlesticks game, overall I actually don't think it was a big part of the win, but it had a lot of like clutch moments in that game where he hit a lot of like good ultimates.
Behind the Baron, right?
Exactly.
Like stops the potential steal.
So he looks for a lot of plays like that, which I'd say do make him the weakness in the sense that you can usually bet on Mole's going to look for this type of play once a game, but still their weakness definitely is Bew, but at the same time, he does his job pretty well every game. He's not a detriment to the team, even though he's a weakness.
So you'd both throw a 2-0 under this, is what I'm getting.
I think so.
2-0 for V5. And, of course, they first have to verse FPX, which we're going to be seeing tomorrow. Dagda, you and I are going to be casting.
I do want to highlight real quick that is the matchup, PPGod against Crisp. Obviously, PPGod was on Fun Plus Blaze, so it's going to be fun.
But also called something else in the league once upon a time that I was told not allowed to say on broadcast.
Just on the thing that I really like about PPGod's Thresh in particular is like when I look at Crisp or when I look at Chelsea, I'm like looking to see him stand out and be this big performer. It's like these massive playmaking abilities. What I love is PPGod actually plays a super passive Thresh. He's really defensive and just plays to protect Sam D. And it's opened up Sam D to be a much bigger carry. So when we look towards the likes of the Bard, he can play, obviously, and have these big playmaking moments with the ults, but I do still enjoy watching PPGod on this Thresh, still having a much, like, just protecting Sam D in a lot of these cases.
Listen, Listen, everything you're saying is absolutely true. I understand why you like it, but that is not the LPL mindset.
I know,
You
but
want
I
a
do.
defensive Thresh. What is that?
No, I want a defensive Thresh that opens up Sam D to make these plays. He's the VIP of the 5 Vs of victory for
No,
V5.
I want
The
to see.
VIPP.
I want to
Yeah.
see PPGod blindly flashing over terrain, throwing hooks out non-stop and hoping for the best.
But that's what he takes the Bard for. The Bard is the playmaking, and then you
Hey.
got like, look, sometimes you've got to, you know, let the rest of the team rise up, show them what they're capable of. Like a good god, you got to show
god.
humanity what they're capable of, that they can be
graceful
the ones. Yeah.
deity.
And you've got, what's it? It's like there's not 2 footsteps in the sand because PPGod has got the rest of the team on his back. So, whatever. There's like
I've never heard that
I think it's
before.
like, why wasn't there? It's a whole story of like, why wasn't there 2? Well, in my difficult parts of life, why wasn't there 2 footsteps in the sand beside me? It's like a religious story thing.
Okay.
So I thought it was more widely known. Maybe it's just an Irish thing, but like, yeah. So basically, PPGod sets up the rest of the team to carry, and that's what he does in those situations. It's-
Look, everything you're saying is logically correct, but it goes against the spirit of the LPL, so I disagree.
I will say though, like for an episode that wasn't going to be about V5, this could probably
It's
go on to
always
be
about
about
V5.
V5. And I did
When is it
say,
not? Come on.
I will return to V5 if the performance continues. They're currently 5-1. If they can beat FBX on Monday, which will be out tomorrow, which the audience will already know the answer to this one, and then beat E-Star, V5 will be at the top of the table alongside Top Esports, continuing to hold that second position. And even if they lose against FBX, if you guys saying they're going to beat E-Star here, that's still very close to playoffs. We were all talking about this the other day. What was the number in spring?
8.
8.
Ace, yeah.
So 8 wins. They are, what, 5-1 right now?
They're,
Yeah,
they're
they're potentially
almost there,
six.
and they still haven't played DMO, right?
No, I think that yes, they have.
I think that was
They've-
one of the
it was
first wins.
They
DMO
did,
or
they did.
Rogue
their
Warriors?
Their first series,
Oh.
I think.
Them
was
versus
against
Rogue
DMO.
Warriors.
So it's
Them
Rogue
Them
Warriors.
versus Rogue
Yeah, I
Warriors,
remember it's one of the 2 they haven't played against yet,
And
so...
They're coming up is they haven't versus Top Esports. And so,
So?
no,
Like, what-
no, but well, then that's when they take first, right?
Oh,
What do you mean,
oh, yeah,
so?
yeah.
Dude, you're not a real V5.
No, I meant so. It's going to be an easy 2-0, just like the E-Stars
okay,
match.
yeah, cover yourself. That's fine. We're going to move
You
forward.
need to get your V5 merch back out just to prove it.
You
I want
sell
to actually
this.
get that printed and wear it to one of
I
these.
mean, I
Hey.
think a lot of people would buy that.
If V5 continue forward and we do another show about V5, I'll get you to wear that, okay? So all the viewers at home can see.
When are we doing the PPGod interview? That's what we need to do.
Oh, that's
we
true.
need to get PPGod on. Give the people what they want.
He was asked in an interview actually after one of the games V5 won, do you know that the English fans are like a real big fan of your name? And he chuckled and smiled and said, yeah, I know.
He was very humble, though. He said something. He said, like, do you want to say anything to them? He's like, I'm going to keep working hard and doing
Yeah,
my
the
best.
cute answer.
Yeah.
I like that. E-Star V5, that's coming up on 5th of July. That is this Sunday for you guys at home. It's going to be the first match, while the second match is actually my other debut because I'm looking forward to RNG and FBX, a matchup that was the 2019 Summer Finals, where FBX won first seed, and then you know the rest were at Worlds. They dominated and took over for the second LPL title. So this matchup for me, I think with recent form of RNG, let's cancel out the V5 loss, right? FPX as well beating E-Star. This is going to be hype.
I have honestly no idea who's going to win this match. Like, predicting
Oh,
this is
really?
too hard because RNG is so all over the place, and even FPX obviously aren't, world beaters right now, so it feels like it can go either way. And obviously when you're looking at RNG, the question is always going to be about mid-jungle and, how they show up, and that's kind of always interesting when you have a team that plays around mid-jungle, finding kills and being the
Yeah.
2v2, rather than FPX where doing B and TN, sure, you're kind of facilitating TN, but then it's also about bringing it elsewhere into skirmishes, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the big question is how does that actually slot together? And plus, I think in the top lane, to be honest, having New there feels like a big upgrade for me in this matchup where you've got somebody who can go a little bit better against Khan.
He's
Yeah.
come into the LPL really nicely. I'm very surprised that Meow, who's a VG Gaming top laner, has had that time off and then just returned and been this good.
Yeah, I think he's looked incredible. I mean, Lyric, you talked about a heap how good his laning phase is. And I agree. I think going up against Khan, you need someone who's going to be able to go against that strong laning phase as well. So having him there versus Longsheng, who was, I think is going to be a lot better for the squad. But mostly it is going to be looking at that mid jungle. And if we get Xiaohu and he's on top form and he's able to
You'd hope.
match Doing being the roams or Doing being the roams, and you've got Xiaolong Bao as well, who's going to be able to take over against Tien. But you just don't know what you're going to get from either of these four players the entire time. So I don't know.
My thing is, like Tian and Duinbi are definitely more consistent. So for me, the question is more on Xiaolongbao and Xiaohu. Can they get early game advantage? And then if they do, I expect them to be able to snowball it. If they fall behind early, though, I think FPX can easily close it out. And sure, the bot lanes will be a defining impact, but to me, they will be more a result of the mid-jungle.
Okay.
And sure, Betty and LWX are still going to be the late-game team fighters we count on.
See, this is the thing, though. I don't think if FPX get a lead, they'll just hold on to it. Because the amount of times, even against E-Star, they were just caught out in the most random of places. And I think against RNG, where even though they are this very slow, methodical team when it gets to that mid-game, if you give them the opportunity to go and get waves in order, and then they start having Xiaohu on a split push, and they can then work from that position, they will be able to get back into a game. And it's not like FPX have been as clean as they were in years past and just closing out games when they do get a lead. So I'm not convinced that even if we do see this early lead develop for FPX, that they won't just throw it away.
My thing for like that statement is what we've seen in draft, to where FPX almost always have some kind of late game insurance policy, whether they're drafting like Graves with Duinbi supplementing that and then a team fighting AD carry, or they're going the opposite. They have the Kassadin. You know, you're always going to outscale to where it feels like for RNG, you are drafting things like the Twisted Fade and some kind of early game jungler like a Lee Sin, to where if you fall behind, the game should just be over, no matter how many times like Kassadin will get caught out or something like that. Ultimately, you still have faith that it will win. So my statement's coming more from draft, but if drafts are a bit more even in that regard, I can definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think going into this, I kind of assume somewhat even drafts, but maybe that's my problem because it's also RNG and you don't really know what you're going to get from drafts. But yeah, I think definitely there is an opportunity here that if we don't have like kind of a go late win game kind of champion like a Kassadin or a Kale or something in this, I think it could be a case of FPX, even if they do get these early leads, that they're not going to be able to just win
Just
outright.
on that note, because RNG's drafts were a lot of the persecution from us in spring, especially with how they ended their split. What do you actually think of it now? Because coming to this matchup, if drafts are going to be important, where do RNG stand?
I actually think they're fine. I think draft-wise they're fine, but we see them going towards a lot of early to mid-game execution comps, right? Going off whether it's some kind of like scaling, skirmishing bruiser in the mid lane like a Silas, which wants to fight early on you at the 1-2 item power spike mark, or a Twisted Fate, who needs to be proactively making plays at level 6 as compared to Duinbi, who you know will go for a Kassadin.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes, though, where I'm looking at it and they've gone for this, as like with the Silas and stuff, this super heavy dive bruiser style comp, and you're still waiting on like an Azir that could possibly come through, or these champions that can at least, you know, reset the fights and do well against the composition like this. So there are times where I think they're just very quickly going headlong into these compositions and not really given foresight for what could come out against them. Now, sometimes it'll come out on top and they're like, cool, we're fine, but there's other times where I'm just like, lads, take it a little bit slower, at least try to hide what you're going for, because you just are against really good teams and teams that can draft well, you're just giving way too much information away.
My thing is, since we are in the LPL and we do have a lot of teams who are just fine finding one style, to me, it's RNG have a style, they have a system, they draft towards it, unlike in spring, right, where we'd see different things all the times. Maybe one game they'd go towards this scaling composition with a Corki and a GP in the top side. Maybe one game they'll go complete snowballing. Maybe one game they'll mix both and go with like a GP and a Lisa, Diana, and then some super early game bot lane like a Pantheon and something else.
We're also looking at like coming off the games today with Vici, where it's like, okay, cool, Fiora would be perfect here into Volibear. You're going to play through topside, and then they lock in Renekton. So I mean, they're not always going to get punished for it, but there is the opportunity there, as I'm saying.
I just love the small shade towards the Betty Pantheon that we saw in spring, and that draft, that was a hell of a lot of fun. That didn't net too many results for RNG. It is kind of exciting to look at this through mid-jungle. I do want to touch on some other lanes while, you know, we were shading on the top side and how that could go between Khan and New, excuse me, because we did see 705, but I still expect to see New in this matchup because he has been the starting top laner. For the bottom side at the very least, when previously we just mentioned on LWX and Crisp, at least for Betty and Ming, I think they've had a pretty good start, like for RNG, and especially when Ming towards the end of last split was falling off a cliff of some kind of tilt, or, you know, was actually, let's be honest, he was inting a little bit in some games, has looked a lot more stable as well.
I think Ming has looked okay. I think the bottom, well, that's kind of it. The bottom lane has looked okay, but it's
Better
kind of
than last split.
But the thing is,
Well, not for Betty.
the performance of the bottom lane doesn't have as much of an impact on this team because they're so focused around Xiaohu and Xiaolongbao's performance. Like, oftentimes it'll be Betty and Ming will live and die by if Xiaolong Bao's on point, well then, cool, we're getting Xiaohu out of lane, we're going down towards the bottom lane, we're impacting the rest of the map, or we've just got this constant threat of Xiaolong Bao playing towards the bottom side. So I think they can do well given certain circumstances, but if the rest of the team isn't there to try and support them and help them, well, it doesn't matter that Betty's super consistent anymore because, well, everything else is on fire.
To me, Ming's looked really good again this split. We've seen him just keep going back towards the Leon and the Nautilus, and he's being a big playmaker again in lane. He looks stable to where I agree. Uncharacteristically, he even started falling off a bit in lane last split. Him and Betty weren't doing too well at the very end, but I think he's looked great this time around. For Betty, we always know he's going to be a consistent player on the team. I'd even say he's one of the top 80 carries in the league. You don't need to make flashy plays if you're positioning well in team fights, if you're laning well, getting off high damage numbers, which he is. You're doing great. The problem, once again, is it's not even that Betty and Ming can't step up and carry a game. Heck, we saw Betty get a pentakill, was it in his first series this split?
I think.
Yeah, Betty got a pentakill, but the problem is a lot of the ways that they draft, like you talked about with these like heavy dive comps or these like more pick-oriented comps, if you fail through mid-jungle, especially with how aggressively that Xiaolong Bao and Xiaohu can play, it feels like Ming and Betty don't even get a chance. It's not about that they can't step up and do it. It's the limitations of their drafts and their team system just don't allow it.
I like that you mentioned the stability of Betty because I know a lot of fans came in, especially last split when they thought Uzi was going to come in. Now he's retired, but where Betty was getting a lot of flack because he wasn't a flashy player, but he was super consistent when the rest of RNG weren't. So it is good to see Betty following those shoes once again.
Yeah, and I think that's why I kind of have the live and die by Xiaolong Bao Xiaohu, because if you're going towards these drafts where you need to be able to just outright win or else you're just going to look terrible, well, it's not on Betty and Ming. They can't do too much if, well, everyone else is already behind or they're just not able to pull off these dives. So, yeah, I agree. I think they can step up. They can be consistent. It's just, well, what's going to happen with the rest of the squad?
I do want to say in their recent series, it was the one against V5, right?
Yeah.
That in lane, they actually did look pretty bad. Like in the straight up 2v2, it was actually quite shocking. It also did come down to Mole having pressure in the mid lane, so he was able to like constantly hover and fog of war. But it is the one, I'd say, uncharacteristic series we've seen thus far in summer. But overall, I think you've heard it from both of us. Mid jungle is going to be where we look for this.
Overall as well, at least Xiaolong Bao is playing better towards this split. Again, end of split, Xiaolong Bao was caught out in weird places. Hey, give me a prediction for this one because you had to put it in your prediction document. So that's already in there. Follow through. Who have you got?
I think I predicted RNG in the predictions, so
you can give me a game
I'll
score
say
if you want.
RNG 2-1, but ultimately, I really have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I had it FPX ends, and I think, again, it was like 2-1 in my head was kind of the idea, but it is really a toss-up, and it's more the... At least when I look at FPX, they've been more consistent, and that's kind of where I'm leaning.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
I can agree with consistency, but we said last time I always go for coin flip teams, so I went with RG.
I mean, we should actually get an LPL coin and put it to the side, and that's what everyone does their predictions by for something like this. It'd be a good idea. That's also coming up on the 5th of July, second matchup there. So that is E-Star V5, then RNG FPX. That is going to be a very big day. I think either two / maybe more of us will be casting that, but that's a little bit of a teaser. Sorry, guys. I could be fired. I might not be there. It might just be these two. But hey, let's move forward because we've got a new, I keep calling it new segment, but you know what I mean. I've added some more to the show. Yeah. Hey, we reached out to a lot of people on Twitter, and we got a 2 cents on the league at the moment and a couple of questions that they wanted to ask. So I thought we'd just run through it and see what you guys think. We'll start with Emily Rand because Emily, as you know, big LPL fan. You know, we've all actually been on the ESPN show as well at League of Emily. Yeah. She said, name an individual player you were excited about coming into LPL Summer who has underperformed, and what individual player thus far in LPL Summer has impressed you the most compared to expectations. Let's start with the player that has that you're excited about that has kind of let you down. Dagda.
The person for me who's definitely let me down is Kanavi. I've been really, really upset with watching him because it's not only just... So the team dynamic has shifted a lot in JDG where we aren't seeing them play as heavily towards him. But even without that, he's been in weird positions. He's not playing anywhere near the carry level that we expected from him. And oftentimes it's just kind of laziness sometimes that I'm seeing as well, where he'll just have these backs where he's still in the enemy jungle and they just walk in. It's like, cool, we get a free kill. So I don't know what's going on, but Kanavi just really hasn't been stepping it up for me.
All right. What is Lyric? What is the letdown for you?
Mine might be surprising, but I obviously put BLG in playoffs in my power ranking. So my big letdown is Kingin because especially in his laning phase, because we've seen Kingen go into strong matchups like Renekton against Wukong or Mordekaiser against Wukong and end up either getting solo killed or falling behind in CS. So that's the winning side. Then when he's playing the losing side of the matchup, he's struggling heavily. And in Spring, he was a player that I loved watching because he was so good in lane and so willing to be a lane-dominant carry player, especially if Meteor would give him attention towards the top side. And in mid-game team fights, I think he's actually been all right. But with the team also faltering around him, it's like, well, we're not getting to see the Kingen I was excited for that I thought could help carry this team to playoffs.
It's funny because my thought on this question was like I wanted to put Wings forward just because even though it's not fair because he's come out of LDL, it's still like the expectation was that Jin Zhao would be overshadowed by a better AD carry, and then I thought actually I kind of want Jin Zhao back and Wings is still a bit fresh. Right, so it's interesting that we go different directions, but that we stay on BLG. Somehow there's a trend setting. Let's go more positive, because the other part of that question was, what has impressed you thus far in comparison to expectations? Dagda?
I'm going to end up bringing it back to V5 again. I don't know if I'm allowed to. It's Sam D.
Which one?
Yeah,
oh, okay.
Because I haven't... I had no expectations, essentially, for this guy coming in. I was kind of like, okay, cool. They got a guy from Challengers Korea. Cool. Great. For you. It's V5. Nothing's going to happen. Yeah. And then he came out on his Kalista performance on day one. I was like, holy crap, this guy can position. He looks really good in team fights. I was really happy to see it, but I was not expecting it at all to be, well, proud of V5
out of the field,
and
right?
the AD carry. Yeah.
I love that it's in the proud department. Lyric, yours?
So mine is Ning, which... Even in Spring, the series he got to play early on, right, when they started off 5-0, I thought Ning was doing well. But Ning is actually playing extremely well right now. His Trundle games have looked really good. His Jarvan games obviously have always impressed. Even his Lee Sin games, he's had a lot of impressive, I'd say, carry performances, and he's supplementing his lanes well and having highlight moments in teamfights, which is really surprising. And IG looks like a contender once again.
People are saying that this is like close to 2018 Worlds Ning, which I agree with. I think we're getting like the best side of Ning, the carry performance, where he's looking like one of the best junglers in the LPL.
His Lee Sin looks amazing.
Oh, yeah.
I was really impressed with the mechanics that he showed.
I don't feel like it's at Worlds form yet, but it's definitely close, and I agree. His Lee Sin and his mechanics right have never been a question. It's always been the decision-making around him, but it's also why I've always been a Ning apologist, where you have no good options to make on this team, guys. This is the hardest job in the world, but Ning is delivering once again.
Hey, do you want to know mine? Mine is Wei, because he has the balls to not take Smite in a competitive game. In all seriousness, mine was going to be towards V5. It's actually going to be towards like Wei or Bubu. I could go anyone on V5.
Yeah, I think Bubu would be a really reasonable one.
Out of Suning left field to now that is pretty good.
I mean, from getting solo killed against Kingen as Janna against Maokai. How do you get solo killed as a Janna against Maokai to, being a decent player this time around?
Oh, man. There's some good answers, gentlemen.
I love how that still tilts you every time.
I'll never forget. I'll never forget that.
Hey, no one should after what that was. We'll go on to the second question. This one comes from Josh at Shadowfront. He said, no memeing, where do V5 end up in the split and how far do they get? He said, or how far do they get in playoffs? But I want to say, and how far do they get in playoffs? So, where are they going to end in the split?
I don't have a regular season answer, but I'll say they get the second round of playoffs. So, what's that? Quarterfinals. They'll get the quarterfinals of playoffs.
That's 2 rounds plus playoffs further than anyone ever thought, Dagda.
See, I want to put them, like, my heart wants to put them higher.
Yeah?
But, like, I haven't seen them against any of the top teams yet now. I think,
well,
there isn't
LGD.
Enough. True.
That's one loss.
Yeah. I think when I look at this team, as fun as they are to watch, I think there's still not quite enough there to push them over the line against some of the top teams. So I think it will be probably quarterfinals as well. But if the bracket churns out in a way that they're against some of the weaker teams, I think they still I think they could still potentially pick up wins against like the likes of EDG, some of these kind of teams, and maybe get to the semis.
You're saying
like
top
a nice
4. Look! I'm the biggest V5 fanboy here. You're saying they can get top 4 over top esports, FPX, IG. You can throw anyone else in that 4th spot if you want.
Okay, no.
So first of all, V5 are going to Worlds. So you've got the wrong answer for this question.
They, to me, could be the 4th seed.
I am trying to do so many mental gymnastics to figure out what way they can eke their way
what? Actually, I'm all inning. I'm all inning on them.
You can't change your answer.
No, because thinking about it, top esports, IG, and FPX, I think will be above them. I think those 3 teams are like my guaranteed top 3. I'm off the JDG hype train. I already wasn't really in it that much coming into summer, and I don't believe in LGD. I think V5 and LGD look at very similar levels.
I take IG out. It's IG is the one for me. But we had this discussion last time. He likes highs. I like consistency. So.
After thinking about it, V5 are 4th seed. V5 are going to Worlds.
Oh, hell yeah.
Let's go.
So how far they get in playoffs? Well, high enough to get that 4th seed. And
I think there's the
Dagda,
potential
you need
small
to give me something.
There's like the tiniest of chances they can
All right,
make sense.
here's how you give an answer. They'll finish 2nd in the regular season under top esports because their second loss will be they will take a win off of top esports, and then they will finish in the grand final. 2nd, they'll be our 2nd seed.
Hey, it said no memeing. Come on.
Not memeing. I'm all in.
He says with the biggest grin on his face.
I was saying, guys, play-by-play caster.
Hey, but hang on. Predictions this week. I had a perfect week in predictions. So, because I got LGD over IG, and I got Vici over LNG tonight. So,
okay, so
Prediction King.
So what are you going to do if V5 aren't in the grand finals?
I don't know. I could.
We'll think about it for next
I
week.
think it's going to be really depressing.
We'll think about this.
Something that I probably can't say on broadcasters. I'll go forward.
God.
Yeah, no. We'll do something a bit more G-rated. Hey, I won predictions in spring, and in last year, Raz made me wear wigs because he won predictions. I didn't do anything.
You never told us these rules.
Well, I didn't know I forgot they existed. It was a busy split.
So that's your fault.
We didn't have any breaks, and I'm like, you wear a wig, you're probably going to...
Also, at the moment, we're kind of we're like the children when the teacher's out because we don't have Clement here. We don't, like, Raz has left the building as well. So, like, we're kind of just running around trying to figure out what we're supposed to do.
And our other student, Penguin's not here either. So it's... go for it. I like the confidence in V5, even though it took a while for us to get there. Third question comes from Shin Liu. I hope I said that correctly at Shin Liu. Is there a Worlds this year, if it's not cancelled, where EU will win because of their home ground curse? Because, of course, it is in Shanghai. Do you see a world where EU will win Worlds?
No. Well,
next question.
No. So I think
you don't have to give context. It's fine.
I'm not giving context. They're not making it. They're not.
I think LPL and Korea are just LCK are just so far ahead. Well, not so far ahead, but I think definitely T1 are looking really, really strong again. I think
Dragon X are looking
MSC, Dragon X are looking really good. I think MSC didn't give enough justice to what T1 are capable of right now. So I think they're still super scary. I think especially with 4 seeds coming out of the LPL, a lot of our top teams are incredibly strong, and I just don't see like the two are obviously G2 and Fnatic that I think in my head I'm looking at. I'd love to see Mad Lions going because I had a lot of fun casting the majority of that team at EU Masters, but definitely I think Fnatic and G2 are struggling a little bit themselves at the moment, and when LPL and the top LCK teams are looking so good, I just don't see it right now.
I will say that the depth of talent here in the LPL is so far outweighs. Like our top 4 is so competitive versus I think Europe. There's like that top 4, and then there's the jump off. Of course, with LEC, I'm looking at the the lineups now. I'm like, okay, Mad Lions. You got Rogue. You've also got like G2 Fnatic. It's like that's cool. But I see some weaknesses there, whereas, V5, LGD, IG, all that kind of stuff. Still not memeing, by the way. Just before we move on to the next question, there is 4 seeds for EU, there's 4 seeds for LPL, only 3 seeds for LCK. But LCK has started skirmishing a lot more. I don't know if you saw Ashley Kang's tweet where she came out
We were
and
talking
said,
about it before the show.
Yeah. They've been skirmishing a lot more, and like the way of LCK playing out their games, and their games have been more bloodthirsty. It's kind of exciting to see an LCK like that at Worlds and see if they can at least challenge and become the 2nd or 1st best region again. So.
I'm just excited to kind of... What I love about metas like this is that we get to see the real mechanical skill of players, because it feels like for a long time with like lane swaps and all this kind of stuff, it came down to, okay, cool, this is very much strategic and chess-like, and we're kind of seeing all those things. But why I love the LPL and why I came over here is I love to see just the raw talent of some of these players, because these are the best players in the world, and oftentimes, as I said, it does come down to in these skirmishes, like, and IG are the best example of we'll just beat you because we're better. And I want to see now when we do get to Worlds if we still got this. I mean, LCK now tending more towards skirmishes, and we got LPL that are still able to skirmish. And maybe then that draws in the rest of the teams of we're just going to skirmish. And then we do get to see these pop-off performances from a lot of the players.
So I know I've already asked it, but I will again, because we're already going to have some EU haters who are like, oh, what are you guys talking about? We're going to win Worlds this year. You're not. Get over it. Once more, will EU win Worlds this year? Say it again.
No.
Lyric.
Probably not.
Yeah,
And
okay.
as like
Backing down.
as a guy who's from Europe, it's hard to say, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
can't
welcome
see
to
it.
the LPL.
Here, look, I've been hurt too many times, all right? Literally 2 times, where it's been 3-0 both times. I flew to Korea to watch the 2018 Worlds.
Why'd you do that?
Yeah, because what happened was, so we got to the 2018 Worlds.
Okay.
Game 1 was about to end, and we were like, okay, cool, let's go and get some food. But we only found one place in the entire stadium that was open for food. So myself and my friend Whimsy ended up stuck in the queue to get food for the entirety of the second game. So we missed the second game trying to get some lunch, and then we got back to watch them just lose in like 25 minutes or something. I was just like,
Feels bad.
You know what doesn't feel bad is I saw. I actually didn't say I was there, but I watched as the region of my heart won Worlds, which was season 2 with TPA. So we're not all losers.
You are old. You're actually a
That's just
really old
hurtful.
man.
That was kind of mean.
all right.
Were you watch? You weren't there, but you watched.
I watched.
I mean, that's.
The season 2 is when I started watching.
I started watching season 5, so I don't know. When did you start watching?
You are a
Dagda?
young man.
Season 3-ish?
Oh, really?
Season 4? Yeah.
'Cause I think I saw Royal and Samsung White season 4 Worlds, but I only watched a bit. I wasn't.
So you got at the end of
At
season
the
4.
end of season 4, because I only started casting season 5, 2015. So it's kind of nice how seasons line up with a year as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I started playing. Yeah, because I started playing in season 3, and I came across from StarCraft. So when I got into League of Legends, I started watching the esports as I started playing.
Okay.
So yeah.
That's interesting origins. We should do an origin story one time. Again, I'm kind of just giving people our content as going to be flying out. We'll move forward before I.
Who wants a Hysterics Dagda or lyric origin story?
Dude,
I want a comic
hang on.
book now. I want to
You
be like,
two.
like.
I mean, like, you're talking about coming from you got some deep origins. You, Lyric, have come from, the
Cast,
background. Your region doesn't even exist anymore.
That's true. Thank God.
Oh, dude, it was looking pretty bad towards the end. Hey, I'm going to move forward because we only got a couple of minutes before we have to wrap things up. Now, next question comes from Leo Song, at Leo Song 1105. Says, IG is the only team that can beat top esports during the regular season. Yay or nay?
I say nay.
No.
I think a couple teams can, and not a couple specific teams, but we've seen them. I think you're going to go the opposite way of me and say they won't be beaten, but I feel like we've seen a couple of different teams challenge them. I mean, heck, come on, OMG almost beat them, and it's not that if top esports are playing, 100% their best, treating this like it is a final, which that's not even necessarily a choice, right? Obviously, the pressure is just going to be different, so I think they can drop games against whether it's an IG, an FPX, a Victory 5, in certain conditions. Like, top esports can lose a series, and I do expect them to lose a series, actually.
And it's the LPL. It happens all the damn time.
When you least expect it,
it's just like BLG comes out of nowhere and just stomps them. You're like, what? Why? So, yeah, I'm with Lyric on this one. I think there's definitely plenty of teams. IG definitely have a chance, but, yeah, it can be pretty much anyone.
I will say in the past, though, like, because my love of history and recency of these teams is, like, regional finals where IG went to Worlds as 3rd seed. In that Game 5 where the Shy brought out Vladimir and, beat down top esports. That was a really good regional finals, by the way. One of my favorite. But they've always, like, outgunned through the solo lanes. So it's kind of fun to see, like, Rookie in form, Knight in form.
Another fun thing is just thinking back to spring where we have the fun interaction between 369 and the Shy. Like, fangirl like them and tell the Shy, I love you.
Just so cute.
I don't know. It was cute. It was something else.
I mean, top esports look like people would be favoriting them for the first time in, probably ever, because top esports a young organization, IG, world champions of 2018. Now that's flipped over a little bit, so I like the nose still anyway. IG can't beat top esports, but anyone can beat anyone. So we'll go. All right, we'll move forward. Our last question comes from Ryan Smith at Cleaning Port. Sam D and PPGod look like the best bot lane in the LPL at this point in time. How do you agree on this one, or disagree?
I'm not sold yet. I definitely think we can look at some other bot lanes and see maybe more strength. One that comes to my mind is I actually think Sword Art's playing a lot better this split, so I'd say Huanfeng and Sword Art I'd potentially put over them. Another bot lane I'd potentially gravitate towards is Hope and Mako. They have more experience. They also look very strong in lane. We've seen them get 2v2 kills time and time again. And we just have so many teams, it's hard for all of them to come to mind. Yeah. But thinking about it, they probably are, in the top 5 or 6. I'd probably have them in a similar rank as Kramer and Mark. They're definitely better than Jackie Love and Yu Yanja just because of how low I rate Yu Yanja. So
yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's so. It kind of depends on what way you're rating them. Is it like individually or as a duo?
Yeah.
And then obviously there comes in the whole thing of laning phase versus team fights and all that kind of good jazz. But
I guess overall, like, because I know there's no specificity in the question here, but overall, from laning phase all the way through to team fighting and like,
I'd say no. Then, like,
Yeah.
I don't think they're the best. I think they're good, and
Yep.
I'm pleasantly surprised at how good they are, especially when
They're
they have-
nobodies.
and not just nobodies. They have a language barrier too. Like, we need to remember that Sam D, is Korean, PPGod obviously Chinese, so there's some issues there, and they've even said in interviews like, "Hey, we still don't communicate perfectly. There are issues, but." Yeah.
This is not even their final four.
Exactly.
Oh my god.
And I also want to point out, because we talked about this a bit on broadcast, how we speculated that PPGod is the shot caller from their face cams.
Yep.
He confirmed in an interview, him and Weiwei are the shot callers of this team. So that's another impressive aspect to him and Sam D's dynamic. But yeah, going back to the question, no.
But
Not the best bot
pleasantly
lane.
surprised it's still nice.
yeah, and I agree with Lyric. I think it's hard because there's so many different facets to it to kind of be like, yes, definitively. But I still agree. I think they're maybe top 5, top 4 for me. I think they're still incredibly good. I'm really happy with them. But definitely when you do look at some of the other top caliber bot lanes, it's hard to put them there. And it's always difficult looking at top esports with Jackie Love because Jackie Love is so damn good, but Yuyanji
Yes.
is such a letdown.
But yeah, I mean, Yu Yan has improved, but Yu Yan
He has,
sorry,
but
improved.
yes.
I even want to say for FPX's bot lane.
Yeah.
I still am going back to that teams that have won both LPL and Worlds in recent years. Actually, they just won Worlds. They get the benefit of the doubt from me that I do expect by the end of the split, LWX and Chris are also going to be firing on all cylinders. But I assume this question is talking about just right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd say Fit 6, somewhere around there is fair.
I will say their laning phase is a pleasant surprise at
It's
the very
good,
least.
yeah.
Like the amount of 2v2 kills. Who
Yeah,
was
they're
it I
up
did the segment
to-
with?
yeah, it was myself. I think they're at 3 or 4 at the moment.
Wasn't it 6? Wasn't it 6? Because it was the PP-God stat with 2v2
You need to remember
kills.
Can't remember.
that for
Can't
our
remember.
stats, they also don't just count in lane. So if you get a kill on the map, which is YouTubers, the other it will also count the stat.
Okay.
But still,
Yeah.
we've seen them get in lane 2v2 kills numerous
DMO.
times.
I mean,
yeah,
did it
exactly.
against the last
in their
Helper Mitsuki.
first match.
Wasn't
they
it the
got one.
RNG
Yep.
game as well, where the bottom lane they forced out
Yes.
1 or 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, we talked about this in the RNG segment, that V5's bot lane was bullying RNG's bot lane. So V5's bot lane definitely looking good.
It's I knew there was going to be a question about Sam D and PP-God. Appreciate the questions sent in again. We'll be asking every week from now on because it's a nice way to finish off the segment, see what the fans think about the LPL. I know they're excited to see the podcast, but gentlemen, a big thank you for joining me yet again. Lyric at the end, Dagda in the middle, and Hysterics at the end. If you're not looking visually, then you'll be very confused about where we're sitting. We're on a couch, in a cloud, on a seat. You know what? We're in PPGod's lounge room. He invited us over, and we're having tea. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for tuning in to The Last Hit, the LPL podcast. Of course, that's with you every week. Episode 3 done and dusted. We'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll be talking about some surprises coming up as we hit the halfway point. It is bye for now, but not forever. We'll see you in PPGod's lounge room.